大家好，我是 Eduardo，也叫 Pozra。Pinia 和 Viewwatcher 的作者，我现在学习中文，但是但我说的还是不很好，对不起。但我说的不是很好，谢谢Copilot 和 Anthony Fu 和依琳和申请窗的帮助，PPT 是中文的，但是我会说慢慢英文。那I'm going to switch to English. I think I'm going to do my best to speak slowly. So English is not my native language. I'm usually Spanish. I'm Spanish and I live in France. Both are French and Spanish are my native language. So I'm going to try to do my best to choose good words that are easy in English and speak as slow as possible. So I've been part of the core team for 70 years or 80 years. And during this time, I've seen a lot of different solutions for data fetching. I've seen things like just client-side only data fetching. So it's an approach that is very simple because you only need to use your fetch function, you await it, and you set the data. And you can do this in a watcher. And you can customize it easily because the code is there. So you can add loading state, you can add error state, you can add the try catch. And we can use anything we want from the component, like props or the state. But the problem is, this is client only. It doesn't work like SSR. And it has other problems, of course, but I'm going to limit to this. I have seen also suspense. I think this is very common nowadays. So suspense is even simpler than client only. It's also very intuitive because you just await within the script setup. It works without the router. So this is worth mentioning because you can also use it in applications that do not have a router. It depends on mounting, however, which means that we need to mount the component in order to run the fetch, the data fetching. Otherwise, it doesn't run. And because of that, we have some issues. We have a waterfall fetching. So if we have any nesting of components that also do a fetching, you have to wait for the parent fetching to finish. And then we have the children do the fetching. Therefore, we also have issues like we cannot do a preloading unless we mount the component, which can have performance implications, performance issues in big applications. And there is no route watching. There is no way to react to the params or query changing. You have to remount the whole thing. There are other ways, composables. For example, using a solution like view query, and you have a very small code, and you can even add SSR support very easily. So here I'm using on-server prefetch instead of suspense. It might look a little bit weird, but it allows you not to have the waterfall fetching. And this is nice because you're using a composable, which is feature-rich. So it has a lot of possible features, a lot of options that you don't have otherwise, or you can build them yourself in your own composable. Things like a cache, the duplication of requests. So even if you call multiple times the same fetch, you only have one running. You have persistence with plugins. So you can have a persistent cache. So if you reload the page, you still have the cache you had before. It's very concise compared to the try catch with isLoading. And it supports SSR, which is great. Now I have another version, which some of you might recognize. It's a navigation guard. So the navigation guard is very different because it happens inside a router navigation guard. So because of that, it can modify the navigation, right? And usually the way it works is we put a function that fetches inside of meta, which allows you to put anything you want. And then you can use that information in a before result in order to await the call, which also allows you to handle other things. Like, for example, you can handle errors. So if you have a 404, you can maybe store the error somewhere and display it on the page. If you have a forbidden error, a 403, you can redirect the user to a login page so that they need to log in before access your page, which is very convenient because you only have to write this once and it just works across the application. It has other benefits. If you run everything within the navigation guard, it also helps with metrics and other analytics, because if you can time things between the start of the navigation and the end of the navigation, it's easier for you to know which pages are slower, to trigger some analytics events, etc., etc. It also comes from the benefits of having a loading state. Now, this is not 100% true today. There is no way to hook into the browser UI loading spinner. But when you load a page, usually the browser has a loading spinner next to your tab. And right now with the history API, this is not possible. History API, it's a bit old. It's not the best, but right now is the only thing we have in our browsers. The future version that is supposed to supersede or to be the successor of History API is the Navigation API. The Navigation API will allow you to have to connect the navigation, or rather to delay the navigation, and the browser UI will display that loading state. So you don't even need to do anything. I mean, what I'm going to show you later, to have that loading state appear. So from a user experience perspective, this is better in terms of accessibility and just letting the user know what is happening. That way you don't have to write any extra code. The browser and the UI already have something that works for you. The issue with this approach, the main big issue, is that we are next to the router. We are not in our component. So we cannot use the component data at least easily. There is no way to really do that. And the code is not collocated anymore. It's not next to each other, which is a nice feature of Vue. We have a script, we have style, the template, they are all collocated in one file, the SFC, and that's pretty nice. And now we don't have that anymore. And last, we also need some way to store the data, like a store. So we need to put the data that we fetch in the store in order to share it across the navigation and the component, because we have two different parts fetching. So why is it used from this? I mean, the use. What we can see is that data fetching becomes a very complex topic, not only because it's not as easy as it seems, but also because there are many, many ways to do it differently, depending on how your application handles the data fetching. And there are many edge cases you want to handle to display loading state, error state. So there is a lot of things to take into account. On top of that, to add more complexity, data fetching is not just something located in one component. It touches multiple parts of an application code base, like the routing, it can be stores, etc. And the problem is it's very common, right? It's very common. So people would expect a way. Oh. 1, 2, 3. People would expect a standardized version, a standardized way, a common way documented to do these kind of things, because most of web applications do data fetching. I don't think I've seen a single, I mean, we can do so many things on a web, which is great, but mostly all applications have some kind of data fetching happening somewhere. So it would be great to have a common way to do that. Now, the issue with the things I show, the two APIs, but the multiple ways I show to do data fetching, is that some of them have collocation of the code, and others are navigation aware. So they are within a navigation guard, and they can control the navigation, but not both. We don't have both things. Is it even possible to have both things? And so today, what I want to show you is what I believe will be a standardization of the data fetching. And I call these the data loaders, which is a boring name, but it doesn't have to be exciting because it's supposed to be a standardization. So it's not a funny name like Pinia. And let me show you how it looks. The data loader, is a Vue plugin that is going to add a navigation guard to handle the data fetching, and also a function, define loader. Now, I'm going to explain define loader in detail, but define loader is going to be used within the component, and that's important. The way define loader works is like this. First, the highlight is wrong, but it's not constant. I want to highlight script setup. We have two different scripts. So we have the good old-fashioned script and script setup. This is important to extract the fetching logic outside of the component. That way, we don't depend on mounting like we do with suspense. Next, we have this define loader that has an asynchronous function that does the fetching. That's it. And it's something important to note is that everything we need to fetch, so for example, the user ID, if we are displaying a user profile, if we're doing search results, we have what the user wrote, we have the page 1, 2, 3. Everything should be contained in the route with params or query. It shouldn't be a prop of the component, because when we do it this way, we are sure that if we share the page with someone else, they're also going to end in the same page as we were. They're going to see the same thing we were seeing. And so we return anything we want. And this function is returning a composable. Again, my highlight is wrong, but you will see later. It returns a composable. So it starts with use something. We export the composable to let the router know that this page component, so this component that is connected to a route, needs this loader. And then the router can run the loader when needed. And also, because we export it, we can use it anywhere. And that's going to be very, very nice. Now, what do we get? We get the data, which I'm renaming to user, which is what we got. We just return up just below or above. We have is loading, which is going to be true or false, depending on the fetching, if it's still running. We have an error, which will give us access to expected errors. So errors that you might want to display in the page. I'm going to cover this later. And then we have a reload page, which allows you to trigger the fetch again without a navigation. So this is like in Twitter homepage, or I guess Weibo as well. You can pull to refresh. So you don't need to navigate again to do that, which is one of the most requested features of your browser. So what do I mean by navigation aware, which is something I've been saying since before? It means that we run in a navigation, and we can throw or cancel or redirect the navigation, just like in a navigation guard. So for example, I can try catch here and say, oh, if the status of the error is 404, I can use this navigation result, which is something specific to data loaders. And you can pass in as an argument anything you can return in a navigation guard. And this allows you to control the navigation. So you can redirect, you can cancel, anything you want. Otherwise, we can also throw the error. And this is just like cancel the navigation, exactly like a navigation guard. So one thing important to note is that navigation aware doesn't just mean that I can block the navigation. It has other implications. It allows us to have consistent partial updates. Now, this is a little bit complicated to understand just from text, but I'm gonna show you a demo. So blocking loaders, data updates after the navigation. Since we can have multiple loaders for one page, they can fetch multiple things. And so your page will still be displayed where you are fetching, but the data will update after the navigation. So you don't have only part of the page being updated with the new version and other ones showing the old version. On the other hand, there is another version that doesn't block the navigation and that immediately updates. And I'm going to show that later. So let me give you an example. I'm going to show you first with a client-side navigation. So this is using just a watch. So I'm checking MIO profile on GitHub. This is just an example. And I'm doing two fetches. So the first one is loading the information from the profile, which is the picture and the name. And then the last one that I'm fetching somewhere else, and in another component, is the follower count. So on GitHub, Evan has 100,000 followers. Congrats, I think you reached that number very recently. And then imagine I navigate to another profile, like I'm checking the people who he is sponsoring. I can see my face there, and I can click on it. And I go there, it updates first, and I say, wow, I have 100K followers. I'm going to tell the people, and then I go, like, come see my followers. And then I come back and say, oh, shit, it's just 5,000. The problem here is that we're displaying the old data, and we are still fetching multiple things. If we use the data loaders, everything is awaited. So you see that we have a loader happening because that's the client, the global loader status. We get to the page, we have all the information. So if we go to another page, the same thing happens. We wait for all the information to be there. The interesting part is that we are not limited to doing it this way, but this is just like a basic same default, and it would just work. We don't have any issues with the result. Oops. I will show the code afterwards if I have time, but since I'm speaking very slowly, closer. Okay. I'm not sure about half the time. Is it okay? It's not too loud. Oh, sure. So, not blocking the navigation. How can we do that? I was talking about lazy. And so we can just pass these lazy properties. It might change in terms of naming later on. It could be defer. Right now, lazy is because nuts also have this field. So when we have lazy true, we still trigger the navigation we still trigger the fetching during a navigation, but we do not await. So it doesn't block the navigation. Because of that, we cannot control the navigation. We cannot return a red array. We cannot throw an error, return false, or rather new navigation result false. And also, any thrown error will automatically appear in error because we are not blocking the navigation. So we assume that we can locally handle the error, locally display what the error is. Now, why do we do this? So it allows us to have or to distinguish important data from not important data or essential. So for example, if I'm displaying artwork details like paintings or sculptures, and then I'm also displaying related art or related artists. So other people who have done maybe similar things. So for example, if I have Picasso art, maybe I show Miró, which is another Spanish painter. Maybe I show something else. The important part is the artwork details are important. I always want that information to get into the page. That's the main reason the user go to the page in the first place. The related artwork or artist is not. So it can wait. It can be lazy. That also means that the data for artwork is always defined. You don't need to handle undefined. You don't need to handle VE data. It's always there. On the other hand, related artist data can be undefined. So we need to handle locally the loading state, the undefined state with the if is loading, VL data, etc., etc. Now let's talk about error management, which is connected a little bit to lazy, but not limited. Since regular loaders, the ones that are not lazy, block the navigation, any error that is thrown or rejected is going to cancel the navigation. If you want to locally display the error, for example, not found or any other custom error, you can define a set of expected errors as an option, also globally outside. And usually you use instances. That way we can check with instance of. There is also a function syntax. I'm not going to go through the whole API versions, but that allows us to have in error anything we need. So here we can handle locally the error if we want. And any other unexpected error will still appear on router on error, for example. And you can handle it globally if you want. And the good part is we can do both. So we're not limited to locally or globally, which is one of the points of Suspense, which is more like global, outside of the component, and a composable like view query, which is local. So what about all the other things we talked about in the beginning, like cache, persistence, where did they go? So the thing is, there is no defined loader in reality. I was kind of lying to you. I'm sorry. Defined loader is a lie. But so the real one is defined basic loader. Defined basic loader is the implementation of defined loader with the bare minimum, just the minimum set of features that I talked about, and a few others that are also there. But the interesting part is that we can implement other versions of loaders that have more features. For example, we have Colada loader. Colada loader doesn't take a function anymore. It takes an object, and that object can be anything you want. In this case, you have a key, for example, which is specific to Pinia Colada, not just Pinia. It allows you to persist to a cache. It's a cache key. And then we can add things like a stale time. So for example, this is 5 minutes. So it means that the cache is going to be reused for 5 minutes, and no fetch is going to happen for 5 minutes because we consider the data to be fresh. So we're going to be much, much faster. Imagine the user going back and forward in a page is going to be nearly instant. And I'm going to show you that in a demo. And also, we get to expose extra functions, extra properties, anything we need that is specific to implementation or library. So for example, refresh, in this case, is different from reload because it only loads if it's not fresh. So you can call it all the times you want in the 5 minutes window. It would only fetch once. The initial one will be the one fetching. So defined loader is in reality a spec. It's a way of defining loader. And right now we have two existing loaders. We have defined basic loader and defined Colada loader, which is the loader for Pinia Colada. The future idea is to have also versions for view query, WebSockets, GraphQL, Viewfire, and each of them can have specific features like real time or the plugin persistence with view query, for example, etc., etc. Now, you might be wondering what Pinia Colada is. So Pinia Colada is a drink. Apparently it's not very popular in China, which is normal, I guess. The name is in Spanish again. It's just a cocktail, but I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to the library. So this is the logo of Pinia Colada. It's a cute logo. Again, I hope you like it. I don't have stickers yet, but I will have them. Pinia Colada is just an async state management layer for Pinia. It has things like caching validation, deduplications, a plugin API, but it's still a work in progress. So I wouldn't recommend it to use it in production. The data loaders itself is still a work in progress too. If you're interested, you can check the documentation and the GitHub repository. Now let me show you an example. Since we're in China, some of the images do not work, so that's why you see these blurry things. You can use your imagination to imagine that we have full resolution images of earthwork. Do it again. So I search, I have the results. I can navigate through pages. Normally, you see the small white rectangle. That's supposed to be the images like this, but it still doesn't work, which is a shame. But I will have the demo online so you can check it out. Now, I'm going through some pages here, and now you will see that if I go back, it's completely instant. It's fairly safe to assume that the results are not going to change for maybe 1 hour or even 1 day. So I set a stale time of 1 hour. I can also check the details of this art piece, which of course I don't even know what it is because it's just like 1 pixel, probably 4 pixels. But I can see the title, the date, the main colors, some terms, etc. Now then I can go back. And if I click on it again, instant, like no loading at all. Other ones are going to take some time. Yeah. So this is the code for the search. We have a defined Colada loader, and we have the key that allows you to persist to a cache, and it has to contain all the information that is specific to the fetch. So in practice, anything you use for the function that you call. So here I'm using the page and the text of the search query. I'm ensuring that the values are correct, a number and a text. And then on my query, I do something similar. If I don't have a query, I cancel the navigation. And then I search the output. I have other option, and then this is not used, so you can ignore it. I have some broad query, but here is my use artwork search results. I give data. It's not exactly my editor, so. And then I just go to limit. So it's as simple as that. This is the default. I'm not using extra options apart from stale time. Everything else is the default, and it just works. Okay, here is a summary. To summarize a little bit the goals of the data loader, because I hope I wasn't too fast on English and I used words that were understandable. Navigation aware, we block or not the navigation. So this is, you choose it, you have the freedom of choosing. Collocate it with the page components, same as view files. I think we usually like this in view. It's extendable, which is the most important part, I would say, and the one that was the hardest for me to implement is to have a spec that is implementable by other libraries. It's still a bit rough, I think. It's still a bit hard to create your own implementation, but it's doable. I have a set of tests, like 100 tests or something like that, that make sure that your custom loader is spec compliant. You're not going to write custom loaders unless you're a library author. You're probably just going to consume one already. It's performant, it deduplicates requests and data access. It's parallel by default, but it can also be sequential with needed, which I'm not showing because otherwise it's too much. But it's very natural to write. And it has consistent updates. So everything updates at once, which is pretty nice. if you want to learn more, there is an RFC. I don't really recommend you to read the RFC. You're going to understand very quick. Can you see the scrolling bar? So it's very long. This is not documentation. This is a technical document. If you are interested in helping with the direction, this will be the place to go. I still need to put up documentation where the concepts are more friendly, so you can use them in your application, but it's still there in case you want to check. Some links. I will also share the slides online. I haven't deployed it yet. So there is a plugin view router, which is where the data loaders are. The RFC, Pinia Colada, which is the async state management library, the talk with the slides and the demo, and my sponsoring page if you're interested. Last, I want to thank Hugo and me and all the team for inviting me. I feel very lucky to be able to come. I realize that being in a Chinese conference speaking English is not the easiest for the audience. So I really appreciate that you invited me. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time.